Between 1985 and 2007, a phantom stalked the vulnerable corridors of South Los Angeles, leaving a trail of discarded lives in alleys and dumpsters. The sheer brutality of the crimes was eclipsed only by a haunting, inexplicable anomaly in the timeline. For 14 years, the murders seemingly stopped, creating a terrifying void in the public record. This unprecedented hiatus earned the unknown predator a chilling moniker, the Grim Sleeper. The idea that a serial murderer could simply turn off his compulsions for over a decade defied established criminological theory. Predators of this caliber rarely stop unless incarcerated, incapacitated, or dead. Yet the bodies ceased appearing, leaving a community paralyzed by the invisible threat of a monster who might awaken at any moment. The silence was not a conclusion, but a suspended sentence hanging over the city. The targets were almost exclusively marginalized black women, many struggling with addiction or forced into sex work during the crack cocaine epidemic. Their societal vulnerability made them the perfect prey for a hunter who relied on the shadows. Because these women lived on the fringes, their disappearances were often tragically overlooked or dismissed by authorities for far too long, allowing the killer to operate with devastating impunity. When investigators finally connected the initial string of murders, they identified a distinct modus operandi, defined as a killer's specific habitual method of operation. The perpetrator consistently used a .25 caliber handgun, often sexually assaulting his victims before executing them and concealing their bodies under debris. The ballistic evidence and biological material left at the crime scenes formed a definitive, undeniable signature linking the seemingly disparate homicides. Despite the formation of dedicated task forces, the investigation repeatedly slammed into a wall. Detectives had the killer's genetic profile, a pristine biological blueprint extracted from the victims, but the technology of the era offered no solutions without a direct comparison. They ran the profile through the national database, hoping for a match, but the system returned nothing. The phantom remained entirely off the grid. As the years bled into decades, the files gathered dust in the cold case archives. The detectives who originally worked the scenes retired, carrying the weight of the unsolved murders with them. The biological evidence sat in frozen storage, a silent witness waiting for science to catch up to the reality of the crimes. The investigation was paralyzed by the limitations of traditional genetic matching. Psychological profilers grappled with the mystery of the dormant period. The prevailing theory suggested the perpetrator was an organized serial killer, a classification for an offender who exhibits meticulous planning, maintains control over the crime scene, and seamlessly integrates into normal society. An organized killer could theoretically compartmentalize his dark urges, hiding behind a facade of domestic normalcy while the city searched for a monster. This ability to blend in is what made the Grim Sleeper so exceptionally dangerous. He was not a raving lunatic wandering the streets. He was a neighbor, a familiar face, someone who understood the rhythms of the community he was terrorizing. The psychological discipline required to suppress such violent compulsions for 14 years suggested a predator of terrifying intellect and supreme, calculated patience. The long delay in apprehending the suspect generated profound anger within the affected neighborhoods of Los Angeles. Community leaders and activists argued that the systemic neglect of marginalized victims had provided the killer with an endless hunting ground. The outrage coalesced into a demand for accountability, forcing law enforcement to explore unconventional, highly experimental avenues to finally bring the elusive predator to justice. The breakthrough required a radical paradigm shift in biological analysis, leading to the deployment of familial DNA. This technique is defined as a deliberate search of genetic databases not for the suspect themselves, but for their close biological relatives. By identifying a parent, sibling, or child whose profile shares significant genetic markers with the crime scene evidence, investigators can effectively build a family tree leading directly to the killer. This case represented the perfect intersection of a long-dormant serial killer and the birth of a revolutionary forensic tool. California had recently approved the use of familial searching, making it one of the few jurisdictions in the world capable of executing such a complex digital dragnet. The frozen biological evidence, preserved for decades, was finally subjected to this new algorithmic scrutiny, searching for a ghost through his bloodline. In the summer of 2010, the database sweep yielded a monumental hit. The algorithm flagged a partial genetic match to a young man recently convicted of a felony weapons charge. The young man was not the killer. His age definitively ruled him out of the 1980s murders. However, the genetic overlap was so strong that analysts concluded the true perpetrator had to be his immediate relative, likely his father. Detectives immediately began constructing a genealogical matrix around the young man. The focus rapidly narrowed to his father, Lonnie Franklin Jr., a 67-year-old former sanitation worker and police garage attendant. Franklin had lived in the exact epicenter of the murder geography for his entire adult life. He was a familiar, seemingly harmless fixture in the community, hiding in plain sight while the bodies piled up around him. The realization that Franklin had worked at a police station garage during the height of his killing spree sent shockwaves through the department. He had been in close proximity to the very authorities desperately hunting him, perhaps even listening to their frustrations. This brazen proximity highlighted the terrifying reality of the organized predator. They do not lurk in the wilderness. They embed themselves within the very institutions meant to stop them. To definitively link Franklin to the crimes, investigators needed a fresh, direct biological sample without alerting him to their presence. An elite undercover team began a tense surveillance operation, tailing the suspect through the streets of Los Angeles. They watched his every move, waiting for a single, careless mistake that would yield the final piece of the puzzle. The opportunity arrived at a local pizza parlor. As Franklin finished his meal, he discarded a half-eaten slice of pizza and a napkin. An undercover officer, posing as a busboy, immediately swooped in to collect the refuse. This discarded crust was a biological goldmine containing the saliva necessary for a direct genetic comparison. Within days, the laboratory confirmed the match. The DNA on the pizza crust was identical to the profile left on the victims decades earlier. In July 2010, heavily armed officers descended upon Franklin's residence, bringing the decades-long hunt to a sudden, dramatic conclusion. The subsequent search of his property revealed a horrifying trove of evidence, including the specific caliber of handgun used in the murders. But the most disturbing discovery was a hidden collection of nearly 1,000 photographs and hundreds of hours of home video featuring unidentified women, many appearing unconscious or dead. The discovery of the photographs blew the case wide open, raising a terrifying new question. Did the 14-year gap actually exist, or had the grim sleeper simply changed his disposal methods, successfully hiding his victims from the authorities? The sheer volume of images suggested a body count far higher than the 10 official murder charges, leaving investigators to wonder how many other ghosts were trapped within those Polaroid frames. Franklin's ability to maintain a facade of normalcy draws chilling parallels to other infamous predators like the BTK killer, Dennis Rader. Both men were fathers, husbands, and seemingly productive members of society who managed to compartmentalize their monstrous urges. This duality forces a grim reevaluation of human psychology, demonstrating how the most profound evil can reside comfortably behind the most ordinary, mundane exterior, completely undetected by those closest to it. The successful use of familial DNA to capture Franklin ignited intense ethical debates across the nation. Privacy advocates raised alarms about the civil liberties of relatives whose genetic information inadvertently implicates their family members. However, proponents argued that the technique is a necessary evolution in law enforcement, providing the only viable method to identify sophisticated predators who have successfully evaded traditional databases and investigative techniques for decades. Ultimately, the methods that exposed the grim sleeper stand as a testament to the relentless evolution of forensic science. But beyond the technological triumph, the case remains a somber reminder of the women whose lives were stolen in the shadows. Their memories, preserved in the cold, hard data of genetic code, finally spoke from the grave, ensuring that a predator who believed he had outsmarted time was finally held to account.